Hey, what's up, guys? It's King Kunal here with another video. And last time this is the first video I've made politics in a while on my channel. It's been a long time, but yeah, I'm here to just give my thoughts on the election now that all of the levers of government have been determined by the news organization. So first of all, we did it! Fucking Trump is back and demolished Kamala Harris. Of course, he really just demolished Joe Biden. He has vanquished the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bushes, the Bidens, and the Harris progressive left. So he has basically destroyed everybody, and now is his chance to really get what he wants done. Now, if you look at the states, I'm more of a numbers guy, and of course, he won the popular vote, which is, of course, something I did not see coming. Now, it's impressive that he single-handedly kept us from having a female president 2 times, and there will be a time when a more qualified woman hopefully gets elected president. For example, if I had to choose, maybe Elise Stefanik against Joe Biden or against Bernie Sanders, I would probably choose Elise Stefanik. That would be a good woman president. But yeah, I think this is a pretty impressive victory. So of course he rebuilt the red wall, and now we're calling it. And yeah, there is this garbage pollster that had not garbage. I mean, the pollster itself was respected, but she did take kind of a risk in putting this out there. But yeah, it was a pretty horrible poll, and it said Iowa would be 3 points Harris victory, but of course Trump demolished her in that state. And yeah, Ohio also 11 points red. And Ohio, I think, is the same margin as Illinois, or even higher, I think, because this is just a rounding. So it's actually pretty impressive that Illinois and New York shifted very right, and so did California. If you look at the shifts from 2020, lots of shifts in the urban centers, especially in Chicago, about 9 points, and especially in the New York area, as you can see. That's New Jersey, I think, but if you zoom in to this area, New York City, you can see Rockland, Westchester. Trump getting about 44% here, or sorry, 56% here, and about 40% here, and flipping this county, I believe. So it's some pretty impressive stuff. New Jersey also is actually now a swing state according to Politico, because he actually only lost it by about 5 to 6 points, which is about the same margin that Arizona is going red right now by. So yeah, Arizona was actually the state that I lost the most hope in after 2020, so I'm actually pretty impressed that he won that by such a big margin, because there are all those McCain Republicans there. And Nevada also, I mean, Nevada, it's the first time in 20 years that it's went red, so yeah, just he cut into that Las Vegas margin really well, to the point where this county really didn't matter. It was pretty much canceled out. He basically kept it dead even in Reno, so the only other state that surprised me was Georgia. Now, while the state went red, the suburbs actually continued to mostly shift left. A couple of them stayed the same, which is why, of course, he won, because he improved his standing on the rest of the state. And North Carolina, of course, would stay red. Any state that voted for Trump, my theory would remain red, because they stuck with him through the chaotic year of 2020, and there's no way they would back off again, because that means they hate the Democrats more than Trump. So New Hampshire is another state that I found interesting. The only difference from 2016 in the New Hampshire map is this county was red. So New Hampshire could very well be in play next year, or next election. And of course, we got Pennsylvania. That has a swing. I had as a swing state in my final prediction, but Trump won it by about 2%, which is actually pretty damn impressive. And he even flipped Bucks County, Northampton, and Monroe. This was the county I always thought would go slightly blue. And then, of course, we had Centra, that's State Penn, I think, Penn State, and then Erie. So, yeah, these were pretty impressive margins in the state. And Philadelphia, I think he got about 20% of the vote, which was definitely very interesting. And, of course, he won the popular vote, which is a good thing for claiming the mandate. And you don't see any protests on the street. In 2016, I actually couldn't even fly to New York for the World Chess Championship back when I was in middle school, because my mom said there would be a lot of protests, because it was 2 days after the election of Trump, and there were a lot of protests on the street, so it wasn't safe to go there. So yeah, this time though, you don't see any protests in the big cities. And of course, in the Senate, I'm pretty sure the Associated Press is called Pennsylvania, so that one's gone. So it's about 53 senators, and you have the McCain Republican Mitt Romney people in the Senate anymore. So I think Trump can actually get a lot done because he's going to have about 220 to 221 House of Representatives as well, or House members, Republicans in the House of Representatives. So I'll be going over what he can do in his next term in a separate video. But for now, I really want to just take the victory up and also share with you guys what my final prediction was, which was this. I actually had, disclaimer, had changed Michigan to a toss-up in my final prediction. This was this was the morning of the election day. I had moved it to toss-up later in that day. So because I saw, because I became confident that the women vote in the suburbs wasn't materializing in other swing states, in the exit polls. So I had moved Michigan to a toss-up. Now Pennsylvania, or sorry, the early voting numbers, not exit polls, but yeah, Pennsylvania and Nevada had as toss-up. Wisconsin, ironically, was the state that I had as the Republican, the tipping point. Georgia and Arizona were always locks for me, but Wisconsin was the state that I thought Trump would pick up the fastest. Of course, it was Pennsylvania, but the Trump campaign still was most optimistic about Wisconsin on election night. They were unsure about the other two states, Michigan and Pennsylvania, but Wisconsin they were always optimistic about, which is I actually was taking very. The reason I was confident about Wisconsin is if you look at the election in CNN's graphics, you can see the suburbs still remained red, and Milwaukee and Madison barely changed in terms of vote share, and then Trump improved his margins in all sorts of other counties in the country. So I was more confident in Wisconsin. He lost it by the narrowest margins last 4 years ago, so it made the most sense. Now, of course, he did flip everything, and New Mexico is actually probably potentially also another swing state. Now, one thing that's interesting is Trump did not really, he increased his vote share in a lot of states, the swing states at least, but in a lot of states, he pretty much performed the same level. Like Illinois, which is about 10.2% right now for Harris, he got the same raw vote share, but Harris just dropped drastically. And same in California. He actually got 6 million votes in 2020, but Harris lost about 2 million voters so far, it looks like. So yeah, if those people had turned out, the popular vote would actually still be a Trump win, funny enough. But yeah, a lot of states, she just lost voters because all those lazy people that voted in 2020 with mail-in voting through the COVID, they just didn't see a reason to vote this time because they were never going to vote in 2020, in my opinion, either. And Trump, yeah, pretty much destroyed Harris. I think if Biden ran, though, either he would have won very narrowly in these Rust Belt states, or he would have, because he's usually been an underestimated guy, or he would have lost Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia, and New Jersey and New Hampshire if the polls are actually accurate, and Nebraska too. So he would have potentially lost all of those, and maybe New York and Illinois would go into single digits, and that would have been, that wasn't worth the risk. So he actually kind of stabbed his party in the back though by switching out. But yeah, that is my take. Now, of course, there's one final thing, which is this that I'll look into actually later in a separate segment. Or actually, screw it, let me just do it right now. Which is these 13 keys. Now, of course, the famous professor, or random professor who no one knows, but I've been very interested in his takes in elections, did call the election incorrectly. Now, he can't even use the popular vote excuse. He predicted a Harris win, and of course, he was dead wrong. And his reasoning is, of course, it's a lie, and that's what he believes. But of course, he's going to continue being wrong in his predictions if he keeps believing that. These were his 4 false keys. The rest of them he had as true. Now, of course, anyone with even he was claiming, now I can fix this. The rule is you have 6 false keys and the incumbent party loses. Now, he even had this as false in his initial prediction, or in his initial take before he issued his final prediction. So I'm going to change that to false, and I'm going to change scandal to false because Biden, of course, was under a classified document scandal, and there was bipartisan recognition that his mental health was in decline from both Democrats and Republicans. Of course, the fundamental premise in avoiding to charge him in that corrupt act was because his age was, because he was a old man who didn't know what he was doing. So that's already 6 keys right there, and he's done. And you don't have to look at the rest of the keys, but I'd actually argue that in this election, Trump was not. He was a charismatic candidate who was the challenger because he appealed to Hispanics, blacks, and pretty much every voting demographic shifted left. So he's kind of like an Obama 2008 kind of candidate in this election. Third, short-term economy, I can leave it as undecided because it depends on how you look at it. A lot of people said that the economy is bad, but the metrics were good. But the primary contest, I'm leaning that towards false, but because they trashed their own sitting president, and um, then they threw out his voters. So I consider that a contest. And major policy change, I'm going to leave that as true, even though they had no messaging. So you have to be able to message your product and run on it if you're gonna, if major policy change, in my opinion, is to be true, because that's what the professor said in his interview in 2016. That it's always good if you have a party that has something to run on, but they didn't really run on their achievements. So lastly is the social unrest key. That's false for me because I saw on my own college campuses lots of social unrest, and you can't just say that it's quieted down later in the year because of a replacement of the candidate. The it was there, just like it counted Charlottesville in 2020. I believe the social unrest counted for the whole year since October 2023 for this election. So that's already 8 false keys, and you can argue that these are false, but I'm going to leave them as undecided. That would be 10 false keys, and that would have been, the system works. It's just the professor was a little too biased in his prediction. That's why I failed. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Of course, if you want to take a look at the exit polls, then they are here. Of course, I didn't buy that Trump would be doing worse with women. He lost them by 15 points in 2020. He lost them only by 8 points in this election season. That's a 7-point. No, that's a that's a 7-point swing to the right. And of course, the male vote also shifted heavily to the right. So it's not a surprise to me that he won. The women who voted for him 2 times are never going to leave him this election. So he could only gain from this election because he already knew what his foundation was from his previous 2 elections, which is why I was confident he would win. And a lot of people weren't. And yeah, they got it wrong. But what can you say? It's a pretty substantial comeback. I'll be going over the comeback itself and what he can do now that he's in office to really take revenge on the people who silenced him and his supporters by continuing out his deportations and his wall finishing and getting rid of corrupt people in the DC, and of course his biggest legislative priority, what they should be, and of course his legacy on the Supreme Court. So I'll be going over that in my next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.